some of you do know, but some may not, that our daughter went through cancer a couple of times, and this last time, she had to have her leg amputated, and it was really rough. And I can just say to you that what Paula wrote here, that's what we had to do to find any peace in both those seasons that were about a year and a half long. And all I mean by that, in other words, let go of the script that we had in our minds. Even just seeing her with two legs and running, she was a runner, and well, now she really can't do that. Even if she could, because sometimes people are just, and I get it when they're saying, well, you can get back on that horse and do it in a different way. There is something to that, but you don't want to deny someone's loss of that original, you know what I mean, ideal, because she won a lot of high jumps, and she just can't do that anymore. And to just allow for the loss is really important. Not trying to jump to, right, make it better by some new, it's to allow for those feelings of loss. And that was really important. And then the other piece was letting go of the script so that we could focus on what really helped us to get to loving in the moment and write our lives, our story of our lives from there. So building from there. So it's not give up on life at all. It's actually focus on what gives life, what makes life sacred when we feel that sacredness, and it's love. I think that's, and when we get back in touch with that, oh yeah, that desire to love and be loved and live a life where love is flowing, any other objective that we have that's aimed at, that's a good thing. But sometimes those get shaken up, right? So how to get back to the love itself as just kind of the fundamental movement that we're trying to be walking by, no matter what, right? So let me go back to screen sharing here, because in that human journey, right? So let's see if you're coming up. There we go. You see, here's this image of the heart labyrinth that we have at the center. And that's what I got to thinking when I was invited to come and speak. It was like, you all have that labyrinth. And that's pretty cool that I've seen it every time I've come to preach and when we come to visit, and we all sit on this labyrinth. And to think about what that symbolizes, right? That's a pretty cool symbol. So we have one at the center. Ours is, the center is really about supporting individuals in their journey to live from their center. And we have practitioners to help people do that. So it's more like a wellness hub in that way. So we made a labyrinth outside. And then here's the thing, though, to think about. We tend to think about labyrinths as just a very, what should we say, very peaceful sort of thing. But really, the history of the labyrinth is it was to contain a monster, right? Daedalus was asked to build a labyrinth by King Minos to hold the Minotaur. And the Minotaur was a symbol, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but of really, Minos had wanted power to, as he was becoming king, and the gods actually kind of gave him a symbol of that in this bowl. But then he got greedy, and through greed and misapplication of what started out as healthy desire, he actually ended up getting a ball in motion that created a monster. And it was greed of others too and all this, but then they didn't know what to do with it. So they made this labyrinth to try to contain it, right? And so you get all these walls, and I'm just going to keep going here. And this is from the movie, The Labyrinth. It actually became like a city, you might say. And when you think about it, how do we deal with what we might call the monsters inside? Well, we kind of build walls to try to contain them. You know what I mean? When you really think about it. And that's, in many ways, that's what the laws of society are. It's recognizing these primal desires, these primal fears, that if certain things start happening, they can kind of lead us to some monstrous behavior. And to not do that, right? But in many ways, the way society handles that is to create walls and structure to kind of contain it. Or, right, in the story, actually kill it, right? But we find that actually, if it's a part of ourselves, killing it, that's not the answer, right? It's just not. So here's on the island of Pathos, which there's actually ruins that go back to 7,000 BC. That's not like a full civilization at all. But I mean, there's a lot of rich um, resources there, you might say, of dealing with the unconscious. They even had this labyrinth there. I think this is from like the 3rd century BC. But so in other words, how to use it in a healthy way is a really good question. And of course, now we've drawn on this image of how to go to our hearts using a labyrinth, and really the journey of meeting whatever is in our heart and getting to the goodness at the heart of who we are, but going ahead and being open to engaging whatever it is we need to heal, right? To move forward in living from our hearts, from all of it. In other words, those primal desires, as well as civilization, right? As well as when we do have fear that could go in a bad direction and lead us to selfishness and greed and all that, how do we engage it and heal rather than end up hurting? And, I think the main thing to get there is the difference between treating it like a monster and actually just coming into compassion for our own vulnerability and the vulnerability of others. And in this particular case, right, with the coronavirus, I mean, we're all vulnerable and we all have some fear, both from catching it, right, the fear of that, all the way to what financial implications it might have for us, what the struggles might be, and the unknowns, all these different things. And so it's how to go ahead and create space and a way for each one of us to walk our journey in a way that really a labyrinth represents, as we've come up against these twists and turns that have kind of shaken us, our whole, even way of doing our lives. All right, so I'm going to make my way over to the labyrinth. And this is what I want you to think about as I'm doing that. And hopefully this will work. And if it doesn't, I'll come back right here. So it'll be fine. But I want you to think about what comes up for you, even as I just showed you those images. In other words, sometimes I know in my case, like when our daughter was diagnosed with cancer, I at first I wanted to lash out at the doctors, especially that misdiagnosed her a couple of times, all these sorts of things. But I realized, no, the real enemy here is cancer, right? And how to get in touch with all of our vulnerability in this case. Like I know all the doctors were trying to help. And so in other words, to turn what might go in a bad negative direction from our fear to compassion through connecting in our vulnerability, right? And then being able to have compassion for each other. Because then what happens is you're able to move with love in trying to do whatever is going to be helpful rather than any kind of hurtfulness, right? So that's really the key, as we're all facing twists and turns we didn't expect when you think about what this coronavirus did, and how to, all right, all of us get in touch with our vulnerability and our fears, take them to God, whatever that looks like for us. And then what I want you to think about as I'm getting ready to go over there is, what does it look like for you? Like, what are some of the fears that have been coming up for you? And what's your process that works for you to really take that to God? Feel it. Don't try to kill it. Don't try to push it down. Don't try to contain it. Feel it. Go to God with it. And then kind of trust this journey. Trust the journey itself, the wisdom of it, you might say, and go from there. So I'm going to make my way over there. It'll probably take me about 30 seconds. So think about for yourself this embracing the human journey where you are on your journey, and how to, I guess, answer the call, the beckoning of the labyrinth in this good way, this positive way that you have here in Unity. Okay, so can Timothy, can you put me on my phone now? Great. Go to my phone. You here? Is everybody seeing me? Can you see me? I see you, Timothy. Can people see me?
We're seeing the office.
Oh, okay. First. Now can you see me? It looks like you can. But I'm just seeing one. Go ahead and.
Yeah.
And can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, we can see you.
All right, great. Thanks for your patience on that. I just wanted to be here because of what you have. In other words, a symbol of encouraging each other and having a community where you're encouraging each other to have the courage, the bravery, like Mrs. Darcy talked about.
Yep.
To engage the journey that you're on, right? And encourage each other to trust God to be with you in that journey as we're supporting one another in that journey. It's pretty cool, you know, when you think about everybody being in here and sitting together on a labyrinth. And so to be encouraging that journey of healing as we're open to what is coming up, that could be monstrous, right? If we treat it like a minotaur, but really it's just parts of ourselves that are scared. Primal fear that does come up, like when survivalists are this sort of thing. And natural as can be. Part of what we really are created with these primal energies and in civilization. And so how to bring them together in a healing sort of way. And that's really what changes us from within, because then we're able to follow